All right, folks. Good morning and welcome to Global Entrepreneurship Week. We're on our 5th day of Global Entrepreneurship Week, which is an awareness campaign engaging millions of people each November through 35,000 activities, 170 countries, and other efforts that celebrate entrepreneurs and inspire others, particularly those who face structural barriers or who may never have considered the idea of launching their own startup. Global Entrepreneurship Week Aloha State is focused on nudging Hawaii State entrepreneurs to the next level, and it counts with the official support and partnership of Nationwide Global Entrepreneurship Week, which is GEW USA, and Worldwide Global Entrepreneurship Network, GEN. So thus far, we have had scheduled 12 events for this week, 4 counties in Hawaii, each taking on a day to celebrate their small businesses and entrepreneurs. We've highlighted Kauai on Monday, the Big Island on Tuesday. Wednesday's focus was the state of Hawaii, the city and county of Honolulu. Thursday, we celebrated our veteran entrepreneurs. And today, Friday, we are focusing on Maui County and the city and county of Honolulu. We have 4 events, as I said. The one you're here for today is Small Business Cybersecurity Risk and Management. Up next at 11 is Hawaiian Cultural Entrepreneurship. We have one at 1 o'clock, Getting Certified as a Woman, Minority or Veteran-Owned Small Business, Gateway to Corporate and Government Contracting Opportunities. And then finally at 2:30, Funding Resources for Entrepreneurs. If you want to sign up for any of those events, please go to gewalohastate.org. So today, right now, we're here for Small Business Cybersecurity Risks and Management. In this webinar, we're going to show you free and inexpensive security tricks that you might already have access to, but might not be using. We'll also show you we'll also show you how some of these scammers operate so that you can beat them at their own game. So the guest presenters today are Attila Ceres and Matthew Kent. Attila is the president of Cylanda, a Hawaii-based cybersecurity and IT infrastructure management firm, and Matthew Kent is a network engineer and cybersecurity professional with Cylanda. So you guys, I'm going to let you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, thank you.
We do have a lot to go over, and that's Matt over there. We do have a lot to go over, so hopefully we can get through as much as possible, and we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. If we don't, then our contact info is going to be in the chat and also on the presentation, so you'll be able to get into it from there. So awesome. So without further ado, let's get started. A little bit of a disclaimer, though. So the stories you're about to hear are true, so we've changed some names, dates, and details so that we can kind of protect the victims' identities. So if you do have a hint in terms of what some of these clients are, please don't share it with the community. We just like to take the lessons that we learn from helping others and pass them along so that way you can benefit from them. So I'd like to start off with the story of a murder. Now, because I have a fancy microphone, it's canceling out the coolest creepy music that I had going in the background. But think of mysterious music as you listen to this story, because of course, as we know, the best way to learn are from stories. So I'm here to tell you about a murder. So meet Linda. Now, Linda, she's the owner of a successful accounting firm here on Oahu. She started off by prepping tax returns from her bedroom just over 12 years ago. And with hard work and honest dedication, she built a team and then a firm to support Oahu's business community. She employed a modest staff of 18 to help prepare tax returns, do audits, and perform bookkeeping for local businesses. Now, on this windy November morning, Linda is meeting with the property manager to her company's office space. Now, standing in front of the front entrance, she has a solemn look on her face. Linda awaits by the door, nervously fiddling with her keys, waiting for the property manager to arrive. She thinks about her plans for the day, which for the owner of a successful accounting firm, you would think would be full of appointments, but you would be wrong. Linda is here as the final act of closing the doors on her business. Only a couple months ago, all 18 of her staff were hard at work doing tax returns and bookkeeping, when suddenly, around 11 a.m. on a Friday morning, the screens of her office computers began to change. Instead of the desktop icons looking familiar and cheerful, they changed to look broken and ominous. Programs wouldn't launch and instead displayed undecipherable, cryptic error messages. What was going on? She called her IT guy, but he wasn't answering his cell phone. She sent her staff out to an early lunch. When they returned, disaster. Every computer screen now displayed a message and a countdown timer. The words on the screen read, "Pay or else." Pay or else what, she thought. The text was written in poor English, which made it a bit difficult to understand. But she was able to decipher that someone with malicious intent had weaseled their way into her computer network and copied all of her company's private customer financial files, payroll information, and tax returns to only God knows where. And as if that were not bad enough, the note indicated that all of her data and machines were now locked up using military-grade encryption. And unless she paid this mysterious stranger 10 Bitcoin in the next 48 hours, all 12 years of her precious, private, personal, and client data would be sold on the dark web, and all of her systems erased. Quickly, she did the math. A Google search showed that 1 Bitcoin, the untraceable cryptocurrency the thief was demanding, cost just over $65,000. So, for 10 Bitcoin, that meant that she had only 48 hours to pay a ransom of over $650,000. Well, there had to be a better alternative. Her phone rang. It was her IT person. But after a few sentences, it became apparent that he would not be of much help. Her IT guy had never dealt with ransomware, but he felt confident that her system backups would at least ensure that her files could be recovered. A few hours later, though, he changed his tune. Turns out that the bad actor had been inside Linda's accounting firm for weeks, perhaps months, slowly disabling and encrypting backups, ensuring that her IT person would not be able to get her firm back online. Days, they turned into weeks as Linda worked with her law enforcement, her local FBI field office, her bank to secure her accounts, and a cybersecurity firm to bring her company back online so that her employees could at least try to get back to work. As time progressed, however, it became clear that the damage was done. Unable to gather over $650,000 in cash for Bitcoin in time, the thief made good on their promise of erasing all her company data and putting it up for sale on the dark web. As you might imagine, once her clients learned of the incident, the trust she had spent over a decade building evaporated. Unable to service her clients and with tax deadlines quickly approaching, one by one, she watched them take their business elsewhere. Her staff of 18 quickly became a staff of 1. Only 30 days after the burglary, she found herself standing alone in a deathly quiet office space, completely devoid of life. No employees, no customers, and no choice in the matter. That weekend, she sold the company's assets, computers, desks, and all, on Craigslist for pennies on the dollar. Now standing before the empty office space, ruminating about recent events, her property manager turns the corner and approaches her with a smile. Linda can hardly look at his face. Without a word, she hands him the keys, turns about, and begins to walk away in shame. Linda wonders, who was it that murdered her business? How were they able to carry out their criminal deed without punishment? And who is to blame for the crime? Don't you want to know? So, guys, before we jump into the usual suspects for this murder, just want to take a quick moment to say a little something about ourselves. So Matt and Attila, these are the two of us who are presenting. And Matt, why don't you share a little fun facts about yourself that maybe some people might not know?
Hi, everybody. Well, I'm a married individual. We have a cat for our kid, and in my spare time, I like to go out on the water whenever I can, and then I also do actually my own kind of gray hat, white hat hacking. I go after scammers.
He's a scam hunter. Those guys deserve it too. As for me, I'm Attila. I'm a vegetarian. I like kayaking, and I like playing with my kids, of course, and annoying my neighbors while playing the didgeridoo, the world's oldest instrument. So that's always fun. And what we're going to get into during our presentation is kind of picking apart those usual suspects, finding out who murdered Linda's business, but a little bit of background in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis. We're a managed security services provider, so we're the outsourced guys for companies that have a security concern inside their networks. If you've seen the TV series Mr. Robot or heard of it, that's all about what happens in a managed security company. A lot of what we do is infrastructure management. It's considered professional good services, intangible goods. It's knowledge work. It's what the America's economy is so strong at, and our real goal is to grow local jobs. We feel that cybersecurity is a wonderful opportunity for those of us here on the island to service others around the world, solve their security challenges, and it's a great way to keep jobs on island and hopefully prevent some of that brain drain from leaving to the mainland. So it's part of our mission. And, we've been around since 2007, but, what we really look for are folks that are going to be interested in improving their business. They have compliance requirements and they need help meeting them. If I remember correctly, you folks also have a few workshops coming up on doing business with the government, and I'll try to kind of sneak in a few acronyms there for you to help you out with that, because there is quite a bit of governance and compliance behind that. You may have seen me or Matt or our company. We've done quite a bit on social media with local TV, radio, news, that kind of thing. So, we just do our best to do outreach and educate the community, and that's why we're here. And we appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you. One thing that Matt and I definitely do believe in is that everyone's connected to the most insecure network on earth, which is the internet. And these best practices and what we do on a day-to-day basis help protect businesses from theft, crime, and disaster. There's so much that we see in terms of pressure from outside forces. Those are usually third-party governance contracts. There's outside clients that have compliance requirements. There's IT departments we work with pretty regularly. You can go to our website. We work with folks everywhere from BMW to Tony Group to engineering firms to construction companies. It just depends on what they have, but most have in-house IT departments. They need that outside expertise. Streamlining infrastructure is also really important, but unfortunately, and this is where we're going to really focus on, there's ransomware remediation where we have to work with law enforcement, FBI, Homeland Security, and to get companies back online, and then we have to work with attorneys and that kind of thing to kind of do the remediation and the incident response for those organizations. So it is unfortunate, it is costly, but we do have to help folks sometimes once they fall into that pit. So what we do on a day-to-day basis is the cybersecurity real-time protection services. It is the compliance bit, and it is the IT and infrastructure management. The reason I'm kind of going through these is because if you are more interested in that, there will be a link at the end of this presentation to download the entire presentation. You can go more into depth on this, but I really want to focus on you and how we can help you folks become more resilient in this age. So let's investigate our murder suspects, right? Who killed Linda's business? So let's start with suspect number one. We're going to go through cyber hygiene. And yes, that is an icon representation. You should not be putting liquid on any computer equipment. Suspect number two here is social engineering. And suspect number three is computer and network protection. So, question for you. Who do you think it is? Why don't you take and put that onto a Post-it or something else? Just write down, do you think that it's suspect number one, suspect number two, or suspect number three? Write that down, but don't show your neighbor. We're going to get to that at the end. Write down who you think the suspect is. And we're going to go through each one of these. And if you change your mind, that's fine. You can always change your response there. But before we get into the suspects, where do you think the Linda's information went? Do you guys remember where Linda's information was stolen and taken to? Those of you who are paying attention, that was the dark web. That is correct. And when we talk about the dark web, there's some confusion or ambiguity about it. So I'd like to just spend maybe 30 seconds going through it. Think of the internet as being a giant iceberg. Right, and as most of you know, the icebergs are famous for sinking the Titanic. And the Titanic hit the underside of the iceberg, and that means that most of the iceberg is underneath the ocean. So it's underneath the sea. And so what you see on the internet, the surface web, that's the part of the iceberg that you see. That's where you have Facebook and YouTube and news sites and that kind of thing. But the deep web, which is one step underneath, those are private networks. Those are networks that would be for financial institutions, universities, research labs, that kind of thing. And underneath that is the dark web. And dark web is where bad things happen. If you've seen the sequel to Wreck-It Ralph 2, they go into the dark web and, they kind of make light of it, and they make it kind of like a little bit of a dark experience, but definitely not scary. The real dark web is actually a lot more scary than what they portrayed there in that movie. So don't take my word for it. Let's look at what Wikipedia says dark web is. Now, according to Wikipedia, the dark web is the invisible, hidden part of the World Wide Web, commonly used for the buying and selling of recreational drugs for totalitarian societies such as ISIS to communicate with the outside world, operating organized crime syndicates, human trafficking, corporate espionage, identity theft, illegal trade, and media exchange for pedophiles and terrorists. Yikes. Not a place you want your personal accounting data to be up there for sale. So you don't want your dark web stuff to end up there. We do free dark web searches for businesses. If you're interested, you can reach out at the end of the presentation. That's not something that we profit off. It's strictly to help the community. So if you want to reach out or know how to do that, we can do that at the end. So let's investigate suspect number 1. That's going to be cyber hygiene. And if you guys wrote down cyber hygiene as being the potential suspect, well, you could be, you may have a strong case there, because one thing about cyber hygiene is that it's not that we're all bad people. We just have often unintentional bad computer habits, and, because we're all busy, right? We all have lots of papers and phone calls and things to do. But unfortunately, that means that you'll probably pay for these poor habits later. Now, let's get into what some of those habits might mean. And this is where Matt's going to jump in. We're going to talk about passwords. And Matt, why don't you take it from here, and let's talk a little bit about passwords from this point.
All right, everybody. Yeah, so the reason why I'm doing this portion on passwords, and I'll get into the story in a little bit, but it came up with, with a family gathering a few months ago, and something came up that brought this to light, and I realized, this is something that everyone should be paying more attention to. We all know that passwords are important, but it's just something that I realized people haven't really, had a talk about. So going into the history of passwords, as most of you can probably guess, passwords and the usage of passwords has been around since ancient times. And in fact, back in the Roman days, passwords were known as watchwords, and they were inscribed on tablets and handed out to runners that would deliver it to groups of the night guard. They would memorize the tablet or the watchword, and then the tablets would be brought back, and if any were missing, the tribunals would know something was up and would immediately launch an investigation. That's how passwords back in the day were sent out and shared amongst guards and whatnot. So it was kind of an interesting system. Nowadays, because we have systems that can manage individual access, password responsibility is left up to us. And so we manage our own passwords, and not everyone does a great job, and so that's immediately kind of a weak link in the chain of cybersecurity and your own security, and being able to break into networks and whatnot. So let's see. One of the key things with passwords is, we need to have something that we can remember. But oftentimes, things that we remember can be easily guessed. People will use things like their anniversary dates, their pets' names, their kids' birthdays. But unfortunately, we live in a world where, social media exists, and we share everything all the time, and it's accessible 24/7. So if anybody is targeting you, they just need to do a little bit of research. They go online, they look up, information about you, if you're into sports, who your favorite sports teams are, what the name of your business is. True story. I work in on the side in weddings, and I have people that I know that they use their business name as part of their password for some of their accounts, which is just mind-blowing, because it's for their business, but it's what they do because they remember it. Please don't do that. So, and the other side of it is, we can use difficult passwords. But unfortunately, if you use a difficult password, then it's hard to remember. And then you might accidentally type it incorrectly, and then you might incur the wrath of the almighty password reset gods. And I say gods because they all work with different rules, right? I'm sure some of you guys have experienced this. And then you go in these circles of like trying to create a new password, but it doesn't match their rules and whatnot. And a lot of times at a certain point, I'm sure you've all wanted to do the Ron Swanson job on your computer and just throw it into the trash because it's like, this is just way too much work. So that's what eventually takes us all back to using simple passwords. So to go into this story that I mentioned earlier about my mom and the family visit, she'd been mentioning to me for a few months that she'd been getting this weird alert on her phone. And whenever she sees anything suspicious, she usually calls me. She knows I work in this stuff. But she couldn't, the alert would go away. She couldn't remember what the alert said exactly. And then she was here for a visit. And so we're with family members. And my auntie, who's having me do some stuff with her, she got an alert on her phone. And my mom looks over my shoulder and she's like, that's it. That's the thing I've been seeing. So I actually went online. I looked this up. I've never seen this alert before because I use a password manager on my phone, so I don't get these kinds of things. But the alert says something along the lines of, this password has been seen in a data leak and should be changed to a strong password. And it's got like the logo of the browser and then some options to like change password or not now. And there's not a lot of like explicit information. It shows maybe the website address, and there's variations of this that pops up on a phone. This is on iPhone, by the way. I don't know if this is the same for Android. So like I knew looking at this that this was a legitimate message from the phone, but I never actually interacted much with the iPhone password manager options. So I did some digging. I went into her settings, typed in her personal password to get in there, and then there's a security portion on iPhones now where you can see your passwords and if they have been leaked online. There's a password checker. And out of the, 150 or 200 saved passwords she had on her phone, the top 67 passwords that she uses had all been compromised, had all been found on the internet, which immediately sent us into kind of this tailspin of panic. My mom did the same thing, and the top 27 passwords on her phone, passwords for her bank account, passwords for this and that, her Facebook, everything was online. So before I knew it, this was a family gathering. There's some parents and grandparents, and everyone has a phone, everyone has passwords. Before I knew it, I was teaching a class on passwords and giving them some basic information and advice. And I realized afterwards that this was probably something that should be shared with the community, the things I was suggesting and talking about. And so that's, what brought us here today. So first thing, don't panic. When it comes to your password and it comes to bad actors getting into your accounts and getting into your bank or your social media, nowadays, when it comes down to what hackers and bad actors are doing, you and I, even if you have 100 or 200 grand in your bank account, we're small fries. We're not who they're actually going after. Yes, that money we have in our bank account, that's tantalizing, but really what they're going after, especially if we have that much money in our bank account, is who are we making that money from? And that company that we're working for, who are they tied to? And ultimately what they want to do is go for the larger companies. They want to, like some entities want to get into the US government or the military. And so that's what's called, and I'm sure you guys have heard this in the news, it's kind of a key catchphrase now, that's known as a supply chain hack. And it starts with you and I. It doesn't always start at a small business. Sometimes it starts with your kids. They get into your home network. Once they're in your home network, then they get to your computer, and then they try and find a password and get into your account. Once they're there, then they get into your business account, and so on and so forth. So really a lot of this stuff all starts with what we're doing in our personal lives, because what we're doing in our personal lives carries over to what we're doing in our professional lives. Generally, if we are managing our own passwords, we're going to use the same passwords that we know at work. So quite often when bad actors are able to get someone's personal password, then they just start trying it everywhere, and they will find their way into other places. And if they could get into an actual computer, then often they can pull passwords from your browsers. There's a lot of applications out there now that can do that. So now we're going to go into the best practices for passwords. And
Matt's key takeaway is there: if your browser wants to save your password, don't do it.
Don't do it. There are a lot of programs out there. I've actually used these passwords or these programs before that basically once you're logged into your browser gives you access to the passwords, of course, because you need it to get into the websites. Well, these programs can tie into the browser and then just pull the key and pull your passwords and put them together, and poof, the passwords are in plain text right there in front of the hacker. So that's one of the actually things I didn't even write for best practices. But don't store your passwords in your browser. It's a nice feature. It's great. But there are a lot of programs now that can tie into your browser and then pull the passwords from there.
So Matt, I want to change my password. How should I structure my new password so that I can still remember it, and yet it's complex enough so that hackers can't figure it out?
Yeah, so the key thing to make a password hard to hack is length. After length is complexity. So complexity, I'm sure you guys have all seen, is going to be like having a number, having a special character, and then having like a capital letter. One thing that people don't realize, and this is up to the password gods, but a special character that we all use all the time in everything that we write is a space. So when you hit the space bar on your keyboard, that's a special character, and quite often you can use that in your passwords. Sometimes you can't. But that is something you can do. For your Wi-Fi, you can use spaces for the password. So the key thing, like I said, is going to be length. And a good practice that has kind of started to become popular on the internet and going around in the security circles is, instead of using something that's really complicated like VM, capital F, exclamation mark, 1258, exclamation mark, like something like that that's like impossible to memorize and really hard to type, use a phrase. So you can use a phrase. I've been saying this one over and over again, but horse lawnmower hospital. And put a dash between each one of those. Like that's just a combination of words that don't make any sense and wouldn't go together. They're not tied to and by the way, that's not my password, so please don't try it. But it's not tied to an anniversary date. I'm not into a horse lawnmower sports team. So because when bad actors start going after people, they make dictionary lists. They start finding out what you're into, who your family members are, who you work for, and they produce this giant list. And there's actually programs built for making dictionary lists. So as long as the words aren't related to things associated with yourself, and then you can put a dash. The dash counts as a special character, and maybe add a number. Having those 3 words and having it add up to more than like 14 or 15 characters, that immediately makes the password almost impossible to break. I say almost impossible because with the right tools you can break the password, but it would take thousands of years. And most of us aren't going to be around that long. The thing that they're trying to get access to probably isn't going to be around that long. So then beyond that, we also need to look at other implementations for security, which includes 2-factor authentication, the storage of your passwords, and sharing passwords. Where something like 2-factor, multi-factor authentication becomes important is, even though you've typed in that really long, complicated password, there's still things like phishing. And this is where a lot of passwords get leaked.
We'll get into that phishing.
Yeah, we'll get into phishing in a moment in the explanation. But people often leak their passwords online all the time. So we've seen it where someone is using a very complicated password, but it's still out there. I personally have had a password I've used since high school that's really difficult and impossible to crack, and I discovered it's out there. Somewhere along the way, I got phished.
So what can we do in terms of maybe storing these passwords or adding 2FA to that? And how do we share our passwords with others? So should we put it on a Post-it pad with like the graphic there and just hand it around?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Please don't put virtually or literally don't put the password on a Post-it pad. I've seen images where people will have the passwords on a little note or a Post-it that's on their screen. And then because they were like taking a selfie with a friend in front of their computer, the Post-it is behind them on their screen and is on the internet, and now their password is everywhere on the internet. Please don't do that. Please don't put it in a Post-it virtually on your desktop. That's known as, when you do that and it's saved in a file that's easily open, that's known as plain text. So you don't want to do that either. And if you need to share a password with someone, you want to do it securely, and there's ways of doing that, and we'll go into that in a moment. To finish up the 2FA thing, if you guys aren't aware or haven't used two-factor, the simplest form of that right now is when you go into your 365 account or Google, and then they text you. Your banks often do this now too. It's becoming a requirement. They text you a number. So you type in your password, and then they send you a message, and then you got to type in the number. That's known as multi-factor authentication. And then the next step after that is going to be the storage of your passwords. So we talked about storing in your browser. While that's convenient and it works, and companies are always trying to find new and better ways of keeping that secure, it is still easily breakable. So what we recommend is using a password manager. And there's all kinds of password managers out there. They're all fairly convenient. They all can tie into your browser. And what that allows you to do is to not only store your passwords, you can store personal information, your credit cards, your bank, but it also allows you to have multiple passwords. So that way you're not using the same password at every single login, at every single bank account, or across your business accounts. And it allows you to also have really complicated passwords that you don't have to memorize. So for me, I have a couple different bank accounts. I don't know the passwords to any of them. I don't know the passwords to my cell phone, my T-Mobile account, and any of my...
So what password managers do you recommend that would be good?
So for us as a company, we use Keeper. It's a really great product, and we really love it. From a business standpoint, the way it's structured and how it functions, Keeper is a really great platform, and we offer that as a service that we can provide, and we can kind of hold your hand through the process of using it and teach you how to use it.
But there are even free ones, so there's free, Keeper has a free version,
there's
LastPass.
Yeah, for me personally, I use Bitwarden. And Bitwarden has a free version and then also a paid version. The difference is the free version, you have pretty much all the capabilities built into it, but you can't share your passwords. And this is where the sharing of passwords come in. If you want to share passwords, then you can do a paid tier. And then that way you can, like my wife and I, we have paid accounts, and so I can share my passwords and different things with her. And that's how.
Definitely want to share your password with your wife. That's super important.
Yeah. That's actually where people get into, or bad actors are able to get into personal accounts. Is someone will call your cell phone company and pretend to be your wife, and they'll have a video of a baby crying on a YouTube video behind them, and so they're stressed out, and they're making the AT&T person sound like they're stressed out, and they're letting them know that my husband, he's away on vacation and he didn't leave me any passwords, blah blah blah. So and that kind of stuff in true life actually happens. So definitely.
And now you know how Matt is able to bait these scammers into getting stuff. Put a crying baby in the background. That works. Well, let's make sure we keep on moving here on the topic of email. So remember how we talked about emails being a postcard, right? Everyone can see it every step of the way. So how do you recommend that we use email so that we stay secure?
Yeah, so when it comes to email, you can kind of imagine email as like a postcard, and if you put the password on that postcard, that's known as plain text. Anyone can see it without, any knowledge of how to access it. And when you put that postcard in the mailbox, anyone can break into that mailbox and see the password on it. A key difference between, the analog physical mailbox and an electronic mailbox is your electronic mailbox. It's there in perpetuity. Is that the word? And it's there forever. So at any point, if someone were to break into your email box and start rifling through things, they could probably find that password. So you don't want to do that. The best course of action if you're going to share a password with someone is put the password in a temporary place. So if you really needed to, I've done this before, you can put the password into a file in a shared location like Gmail Drive, a Google Drive, or Dropbox. After they've received the password, you delete it, get rid of it. The best way, of course, is talk to the person, tell them, call them on the phone, do it in person. That's probably the most secure way to share password. I mean, of course, do it outside of earshot of others.
And if I can interject too, also one of the things that we commonly see is HR departments for companies receiving job applicants and information about employees that the employees themselves are sending through Gmail unsecured. So they say, oh, here's my social security number and here's my bank information for direct deposit. Guys, don't do that to your employer. And we still wag the finger sometimes at accounting firms. Now, by the way, this whole Linda thing, that we didn't really make that up. In case you're wondering, we just kind of put together some stories that we've actually seen that has happened. That's a true story. So guys, when you do send information back and forth, there are some third-party email encryption services that you can use. Some compliance agencies do require them. I don't think we have time to get too much into email encryption, but it is another way to do it. Just know that the email that you send is like a postcard. As it is sent out, anyone can read along the way. The mailman, the mail machine, everyone who works at the post office, same thing for email, except it's digital and stored forever. So that's bad. Let's talk a little bit about social engineering, though, because that's our suspect number two. Suspect number two is social engineering that could have killed Linda's firm. And in those three categories of social engineering, Matt's already kind of brushed on a few of them. And I want to make sure that we get a little bit into depth because we don't have a lot of time. We're going to talk about phishing, which I'm sure everyone gets every single day. It's those emails from who knows where asking for who knows what. And sometimes they're poor English, but oftentimes they're not. Voicemail phishing. Voice phishing, otherwise known as vishing. That's when reputable organizations try to call you on your cell phone or on your office line, and they're pretending to be someone that they're not, such as Microsoft or whatever. And then smishing, which is what we get a lot of. We have a number of people reach out to us, particularly on our blog and on our YouTube channel, about smishing. That's SMS-based phishing. That's when you're seeing the Venmo and the Instagram scams. Those are just on the rise over the past year, especially since the pandemic. So we're going to talk about those three methods and specifically what some common examples of that might look like and how to spot a scammer and what to do about it. So Matt, I'll hand that over to you on the email side for phishing.
So, like I mentioned at the top of this discussion, I, on the side, spend time trying to hack scammers, and sometimes I actually get access to their computers. And so I've been able to see some of what they do as far as the phishing goes. And they do it in multiple tiers. They do it in multiple stages. The first stage, of course, is, they send you an email to try and get you to click on it and put in your credentials. But they'll do this in a number of different ways. There's generally a shotgun approach. And once they are able to get into someone's account, then they will kind of hop from there. They move laterally. So what that looks like is we had a client that unfortunately fell victim to a scam, and they didn't have all the services that we were recommending, so we were unaware of the scam happening. And they were receiving email from one of their vendors that I think they pay monthly to, and in the email, the vendor was letting them know that your monthly payment is coming up, but just so you know, our normal payment method is not functioning at this time. Do you mind paying this other method? And everything seemed legit. The signature looked correct. The language was on point. Everything sounded exactly how it needed to sound. And so they corresponded back and forth. And eventually, they made a payment. And then their actual vendor called them on the phone and like, hey, just so you know, you missed your this month's payment. We're just wondering if everything's okay. What's going on? And it turns out they had paid some bad actors, some hackers.
And this is to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. And if you kind of Google my name, I mean, you'll see that we've done different interviews about how different industries are affected by this. We've seen everything from 150,000, $250,000 successfully being transferred out. So careful.
Yeah. So what they do in this hack is once they get into an account or multiple accounts, they'll set up email rules. So when an email from a specific person arrives in the other person's email box, it goes to this other hidden box. They use filters. And then they mark it as read. So you don't know that email came in. And then the scammer who is sitting inside your email at all times goes to it, and then they check the email, and then because they have all the other emails, all the other correspondence, because their English is not great, they'll copy and paste, and they'll put together phrasings and things that the other person would normally say, so it all sounds legit. In the case of this particular company that I'm talking about, what they did was they got into our client's email account, and then they spotted a vendor that had a really long URL for the email. And they went online, they purchased a URL that was identical, except they flipped 2 letters. And then they started sending email from that account. So then that way, when it got received, it looked legitimate, and then any actual emails from the vendor, they filtered out, so our client couldn't see the emails. So I mean, that's a really scary scenario, and that's known as a spear phishing attack. Spear phishing means that it's directed specifically at you. It's not the shotgun approach. It's harder to spot. But there's a key. You gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say, so what do you do when you suspect?
Yeah, so there's a few key things here to pay attention to try and spot a scammer. And in this case with our client, unfortunately, everything was very convincing. I'm not sure, like, you really have to be on guard to really spot these things. But the key thing is pay attention to the email header, the email address that it's coming from. Sometimes they'll just use the alias, and so you'll see that it's from John Littleton. But then if you actually like hover over and look at the email address, it's like mkadish@hotmail.com. Like, it just doesn't match at all. But because they use the alias, you might have fallen for that. In this case, they actually used a URL, a full email verified that looked legitimate. And so in that case, what our client needed to look for was irregularities. So 1, they asked for a payment outside the norm. 2, he said that a couple times when they closed the email, they used words or phrasings that just didn't quite match. It was like always yours or best, like instead of and sincerely, like just these really formal words that the vendor never used before. Salutations, yeah. Like everything looked legitimate except for like the very end, and that was like a key thing that he noticed. So yeah, at the bottom, when in doubt, reach out. If something doesn't seem right or something seems a little weird, call them. Like it's probably not going to be the case that you call the vendor, call the person that you think something weird is going on, and you get the scammer on the other end. And if you do, you're probably going to recognize it.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about like voice phishing, because we see a lot more of that as well.
Yeah, so voice phishing, this will happen, well, I'll go over tech support scams. So I'm sure quite a few of you, especially in the last couple of years, have gotten the calls from Apple or Microsoft. Now it's Amazon. That's a really common one, where they call you and they let you know that something suspicious has been happening with your account, and they need your assistance to figure it out or make sure nothing bad is happening to your computer or your account, and they'll have you download an app that will give them access to your phone or your computer, any platform, it doesn't matter. Once they have access and they're able to get into your accounts, and they'll start doing things where they're like changing your passwords and whatnot to be able to get access so they can send themselves money. The tech support scams and all that stuff, most of it's all coming out of India. It's very common. Unfortunately, it's mostly elderly that are falling for these scams, and they're also the ones that are really hard to teach this kind of stuff to. So unfortunately, they're very successful, and in fact, I follow these guys. I try and get into their computers. I pretend to be. Attila was kind of impressed. I have a voice modulator, and I pretend to be an older lady. I do like a southern accent and everything, and so I'm able to hack my way into their systems, into their call centers, and sometimes I'm able to actually see the phone numbers of victims. And I call the guy that I was hoping I could save because I could see the messages going back and forth, and he unfortunately let me know that the scammers had already stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from him. It was his savings from his mom's passing. He has his inheritance, and my heart just broke. I felt so bad. So it's not just elderly that falls for these scams, unfortunately. So the other side of these voice phishing attacks, it's also known as social engineering. Is, let's say you've got a bad actor inside threat in your company, and they're trying to gain access to the account manager's computer, but it's protected by multi-factor authentication. So let's say I'm that bad actor, and I need to get into her account. I have her password. I've already figured out what her password is, but I can't get access because of the two-factor. So then I call her up and I'm like, hey, this is Mike over here from your IT department. I just want to let you know that we're making some changes to the server. I'm going to be rebooted in a moment, but I needed to verify your account first before I do that to make sure everything is working properly. I'm going to send you a code here in just a second. And then I log in with the password and do the two-factor. She gets the code and she gives it to me. Meanwhile, she has no idea who I am. She hasn't verified it. And now I have access to her account, and I can get into all the things in the account records. So that's known as a social engineering voice phishing attack. Anytime someone calls and tells you they're going to send you a code, most likely it is them trying to get access with the two-factor authentication. So same thing. If anything seems suspicious, reach out. Quite often, these attacks will come from phone numbers that you know. So if you get a phone call from Apple, for instance, like this was happening with the Indian scammers for a while, the number they were calling from said Apple.
Yeah.
Hang up and call them back. That's like, because the numbers won't route back to them, it'll route to the actual company. But when they call, they can spoof the number sometimes. So call them back.
Yeah, and luckily there's been some new legislation that has put on some security on VoIP carriers that can do this.
Yeah, it's gotten better.
Part of that. Yeah, it's gotten better, but it's still happening. And one of the things that folks reach out on our live chat quite a bit is SMS-based phishing. So the Venmo scams, the Instagram scams, they reach out to us, and it's the same process. Like none of this is any really different.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to mention about the SMS stuff? Do you want to talk?
Yeah, I'll go to the SMS one.
Story.
Well, yeah, I don't have time for the story, but the Amazon scam stuff that's happening over SMS now. You'll get a message that looks like it's from Amazon, and it'll say that your order for your iPhone 11 is on its way. You're going to be charged X amount of dollars. That's a really, really common one right now, and then it'll include a phone number for you to call. That's the Indian scammers. Yeah. But anytime you get a message and it has anything to do with money, most likely it's a scam. Unless it's directly from someone you know. And even if it's from someone you know, call them, because like I said, or like Attila said, we don't have time to go into the story, but we had someone call us that got scammed because they received a voice message actually not voice, a video message from someone that they know and they trust about something that they can make money with. And so the guy followed up and did all the steps, sent out his $1,000, and then the scammers were able to get access to his account. He meanwhile had made a testimonial video, which they used then to send to all his contacts. And then it's like a virus. It spread from there.
Well, you know what I think we should do? We should save that story for a full recording. We're going to do a full recording, and at the end of this, we'll give you a link where you can download it. The portal's up, but the recording's not up. We'll just record the whole thing, because I think that's a very valuable story. We're kind of just short on time.
Guys, most of this hacking, most of the scamming stuff is really hacking, but without a computer. And that's actually where most hacking is successful, is hacking individuals. So the main thing here, the main takeaway is just be cautious, be suspicious. You can be trusting, but if anything seems, a little odd, just, reach out, ask someone, call them. That's the biggest thing, is verify your sources.
And you don't have to go far to see how this has affected us as a country. Colonial Pipeline attack. I won't get into it too much, but that was a successful phishing attack. The one in Florida, where they went inside the water treatment plant, where they changed the amount of lye that goes inside of the water, which would have caused death and burning to anyone who touches the public water supply. That was a successful one. Same process. So it's not a stretch of the imagination in terms of what. How real this is. This is coming on U.S. Critical infrastructure, and if it's coming to them, it's going to be coming to you. Most of these things are remediated through a structured employee cybersecurity awareness training program. I recommend you look for something like that, and it is a typical requirement of CMMC or NIST 800-171. That is something that if you are interested in doing federal contracts, either as a prime or sub, you will have to have something like this in place. There's plenty of options available. But the idea is that if you can get the employee buy-in on that, that's going to really protect you against these kind of attacks. The last aspect we're going to talk about, because we just have a few minutes left, is computer network protection. Now, who thought that this might be a key entry point into Linda's network? Well, you could be right. Now, there's different types of antivirus solutions out there. There's something called EDR. That's the next generation of antivirus. The key difference is that, as you might have traditionally thought of antivirus as a reactive measure, so something comes into your computer or network and then it reacts and protects you. EDR is proactive, and it looks for strange things that may occur before they end up infecting your entire infrastructure. So if you are using an antivirus, that's great. Just know that it's on its way out the door. That's last year's model. EDR is the new shiny object. So it is an arms race between you and the hackers. So having the best stuff possible is important. Web content filtering is also something you want to look out for. This is great if you have a home network for kids or a business network where emails are coming in trying to phish you for stuff. And if you click on a link, it'll stop you, because there are up-to-date lists of compromised websites. And if you do end up clicking on a compromised link, at least it can stop it. Side benefit is if you do have employees and they are, on Amazon or Facebook all the time, well, you'll know. So there is some content restriction there. Last bit is gateway protection. There is, these devices you can buy at Best Buy or Costco that protect you from the internet, or should I say shares your internet information, but that doesn't really stop any sort of unusual activity from occurring inside your network or outside your network. That's where you get into something called a UTM, that's a Unified Threat Management Device. These are done by more professional vendors. So instead of a Netgear, you might have a professional vendor like a SonicWall or a Fortinet. Those are business-grade protective devices, so ask for that from your service provider if you can get it. There's some AI elements in that intrusion detection system. That, by the way, IDS is if you guys do have to do PCI compliance or NIST or CMMC compliance. That's specifically what it looks for, is an intrusion detection system. So an IDS is included in a UTM. I know we're getting into alphabet soup here, so I'm going to try to not get too deep into that. One of the things I did mention at the beginning of the presentation was that we do have a SOC, so a Security Operations Center. That's the little graphics you see in the background there is a simulation of what that looks like. But a SIM solution is a security instance and event management solution. These will meet the requirements of compliance. It's essentially a live team that watches for unusual stuff inside your network. These are technology safeguards that Linda could have implemented and would have seen something happening before the disaster struck. So we won't get into that too much. The other flip side of this is there's typically a behavioral component of having a good cybersecurity posture. So we all talked about technology, but documentation is really important. Doing those dry runs with staff and your technology department to think about what would happen were there to be in a disaster. These are called tabletop exercises, writing down an incident response plan or business continuity plan. These are all really important things that you can do now inside of your organization. It's not rocket science. Just Google business continuity plan template, and you'll find a handful of them that can say, like, what do you do when there's a natural disaster? What do you do when you have insider threat inside your company? How do you onboard your employees? Do you do background checks, that kind of thing? Do you have a acceptable use policy for your company equipment, ensuring that your staff aren't out there doing illicit things with their equipment when they shouldn't be? This kind of stuff, having it in writing, good place to start. Ways to improve your security posture on that. And these are all, like I said, readily available. You just got to spend a little bit of time and do it yourself. I know what you're thinking, because we're running kind of short on time here. You're probably thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much that you can do or Linda could have done to protect her business, and she probably wasn't doing them. And you're probably thinking, well, maybe I should do some of these myself, but I don't have the time. Let me tell you, these are really best business practices in general. And if you do plan on doing work with Fed, or if you do plan on being a prime or sub, there are going to be requirements coming your way over the next 12 months anyway. So think about that. Now, back to our investigation. Who do you think was the murderer? This is the fun part, right? This is the part I like. So remember, Linda, right? Do you think it was number 1, the cyber hygiene? Number 2, social engineering? Or 3, computer and network protection that was the culprit? What did you write down? Okay, we're ready for the answer. It was, in fact, if you wrote down cyber hygiene, social engineering, or computer network protection, you would be right. All 3 contributed to the business being murdered, but the actual murderer was Linda. By failing to take proper measures to secure her operation, it was only a matter of time before it would reach an unfortunate demise. Surprise, right? So, I
don't know if you said it, but this is a true story.
Yes,
that actually happened.
It was, true story. It actually happened. So it was unfortunate. It was a little bit longer timetable. That was about 6 months for them to go under. But yeah, same idea. Accounting firm, and after ransomware, they were unable to recover. I do want to make sure to mention that we'll do a little bit longer recording that includes some of the stories we mentioned, and we'll put this presentation, which is up there now, so you can download the slide deck. If you go to Cylanda.com and underneath resources, you'll see a link that says GEW 2021, and there's a password that you need to access this information, because some of the content that we do provide is FOU, so for only not for everyone. And go to the password is going to be murder to access that. So go ahead and check that out. And I do see that we do have a couple of minutes left, I think, for Q&A. I'm not really sure, do we?
We had one question I answered.
Did?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
The main question that popped up was if a domain can be spoofed, and the domain itself can't be spoofed, at least not very easily. So that's why the attackers in my story earlier decided to purchase a domain that was very similar, and they just swapped 2 letters so they could send from that fake domain and make it look like that it was from the vendor that our unfortunate client paid money to.
Well, INL and zeros, those can all take place of standard.
The other thing that they'll do, and this is the ideal scenario for the attackers, is they'll get access to the vendor's accounts, and they'll get access to the accountant's email, which I see all the time. The attackers will get into the accountant's email, and then they'll start sending to the companies that owe them money, and then they'll filter the accountant's email, so they're not actually getting the emails from the different clients and whatnot. So then the emails are actually coming from that trusted source. You can't identify the fact that it's a scammer. But what often happens, and this is fortunate right now, is the emails that will come from that trusted source will be really weird. That they'll have weird wording. It won't, and those scammers, those attackers, are not really very sophisticated. There are very sophisticated ones out there that take the time to learn the verbiage of the individual. They cut and paste, phrases that they use, and so from there, what you need to do to be able to spot that it's an attack is, be suspicious if they ask for money in a different way or just something out of the ordinary.
Well, you guys have done a terrific job today, and I think the thing that I took away from it is that if something looks a little weird, call the person. I think that's just a great tip. I'd like to, if I may, share a screen. So if I can get that capability back, I'd appreciate it.
Oh.
Thank you so much. No, you guys are great. This is, you're the new mechanics of our lives. I mean, we do everything online, especially after COVID. We really have used our tools in probably not very smart ways. So we thank you so much for sharing with us today. I do want to talk to you about our next event that's coming up at 11 o'clock. It's Hawaiian Cultural Entrepreneurship. So we have 3 people who are going to be talking to us. Actually, I think there are 3 videos, so I'm looking forward to that. And I must say, GEW could not have been done without our collaborators, sponsors, and supporters. And as you can see, there are spelled out on the right-hand side and all the logos on the left-hand side. It has been a huge undertaking with a lot of support and help from everybody, and we just can't be thankful enough that we have all of our support here in Hawaii. It's been fabulous to be a part of it. But you two, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I'm older. I'm 58, so I feel like I try to drink in everything you're saying and hope that I'm not doing a lot of the things that Linda did. So I'm going to go back and check. If you want to see any.
Always room for improvement, and don't ever think that you're alone. A lot of smart people we talk to a lot of smart people that end up falling for this stuff. It has nothing to do with your age or how smart you are. These guys are getting smarter every day, and they're highly motivated. I
saw that you had a live chat feature on your website. Do you want to say that? Is it just your website, Cylanda.com?
Yeah, just go to Cylanda.com. You'll see a bubble pop up, and you can chat with us anytime.
Yeah, we try and answer right away. It comes up in our messages while we're working during the day. So, yeah, we see them.
Well, terrific. We can't thank you enough for being with us. Everybody who has been on this call, thank you so much for jumping in, asking questions, and drinking this information in, because it's good stuff. There are a couple links in the chat box, so if you want to go ahead and copy that, you can. But otherwise, I'm going to sign off and say thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and happy Aloha Friday.
Happy Aloha Friday.
Awesome, guys. Stay safe out there.